I thank the gentlelady, and I now go to Mr. Palmer from Alabama for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to respond in regard to whether or not this is a pause or a ban. It takes years to get permits for an LNG facility. There are billions of dollars in capital investment involved. And what's really happening here is this administration understands that. They don't understand a whole lot about science, but they understand a whole lot about politics and permitting. And I think they're deliberately creating uncertainty about permit approval. I mean, the Department of Energy in December announced that the project's not yet operational. Will have to reapply for the permits if their permit was approved more than 7 years ago. That's billions of dollars in investments that could go down the drain. But they've created uncertainty in order to stifle investment and to discourage foreign governments from entering into contracts with companies that might not be able to provide the product. So in regard to whether it's a pause or a ban, it's a ban. I want to point out a couple of things. One, we probably saved countless numbers of lives in Europe over the last couple of years because we've been able to provide LNG. Even with that said, because of the move to renewables in Europe and their reliance on Russian gas, 68,000 Europeans died last winter in what was a relatively mild winter because they couldn't afford to adequately heat their homes. These are people with cardiovascular respiratory issues. And I've repeated this time and time again. It gets no response from the other side. Same thing's happened in the UK. But what I want to get into is, Mr. McCown, in your testimony, you made the comment about this being a national security issue. I think it is. It absolutely is. You even mentioned something that doesn't get mentioned around here very often, that America is the arsenal of democracy. I think a significant part of that arsenal is our enormous energy capacity to aid our allies and emerging economies. Would you like to comment on that briefly?
Yes, thank you very much. It is, and we have always been the supplier. I mentioned mentioned earlier today that we supplied most of the oil and gas used during World War II. We export a lot of things that is very helpful, and we do it in an environmentally friendly way. We are more highly regulated than almost any other country in the world, and we do it safely. Mm-hmm. And by removing that, what we are going to see is increases in emissions from around the world, not decreases. And I think it's something we have to take very seriously.
But you also understand that China is an adversary. And I've told people this many times, the war in Ukraine didn't create the energy crisis, it exposed it. And the thing that everybody should learn from that is that no nation should be reliant on an adversarial nation for something as critical to its economy and its national security as energy. You see what's happening right now is that you've got a number of non-government organizations and nonprofit groups pushing for an energy transition in the United States, and they did the same thing in Europe, being funded by Russian and Chinese dollars. And
yes, that's true. And, the transition is not an overnight occurrence. I think we all agree we want clean, cheap, affordable, and responsible fuel sources. The issue of pushing a premature transition upends our economic and national security. We need I'm an all-the-above kind of guy, but we need a responsible pathway toward net zero.
Well, I worked for 2 international engineering companies. I did everything from environmental systems to refuse to energy to aerospace. And there's some fundamental physics involved in an energy transition that apparently my colleagues across the aisle do not understand. We're not going to get to net zero by 2050 under any scenario. It's not possible. What we will do is wreak unimaginable destruction on the American economy. And going back to what's happened in Europe in the UK in 2008, they wanted to be the model for shifting to renewables. They wanted to be set the model for Europe. Well, in terms of peacetime economic growth, their growth is the slowest since 1780. That's not 1980 or 1880. That's 1780, the year before Yorktown, and that's where we're heading. And just one Mr. Chairman, just one point here. Venture Global's Gulf Coast CP2 would supply about 5% of the world's LNG by 2026. That would have a bigger impact on the U.S. economy than any green energy project. It would produce about $600 billion in revenue over the lifespan of the project, thousands of jobs, and reduce greenhouse emissions by 140 million tons a year. I cannot imagine for the life of me why we've got groups funded by Chinese money and Russian money that they're really about reducing emissions when I'm really concerned it's really about a threat to our national security. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.